Welcome to the Too Lazy to Read podcast. This is the latest version of what was attempted years ago as Ricochet Out Loud. 2 Liters 2R is simply designed for those too busy to read. The content is stolen from the Finest newsletter, better known as the Ricochet Daily Shot, written by Fred Cole, edited by John Gabriel. The 2 Liters 2R is a creation by Ricochet member Curious John in an attempt to expand Ricochet. Curious John believed the greatest posts of Ricochet as well as the Daily Shot could be converted into podcast form like the following. This recording is made with the use of 2 websites, from text-to-speech.com and tunes2tube.com. If this idea has any legs, it can be harnessed as another source of sponsorship and a revenue stream for Ricochet.com's audio network. Today's 2 Liters 2R is read by Daisy. It was originally written for Tuesday, June 05 th 2017. Opening shot. Leaders get out in front and stay there by raising the standards by which they judge themselves, and by which they are willing to be judged. Fred Smith. Terror in London. It began Saturday night around 10 p.m. local time. A white van drove at high speed onto the sidewalk of London Bridge, hitting several pedestrians. 3 men, in what appeared to be suicide vests, jumped out and began attacking nearby bar patrons with knives. People fought back, defending themselves by throwing things, including bottles and chairs, at the attackers. A chef clubbed one terrorist over the head with a crate. Within 8 minutes of getting the call, police showed up and killed the attackers. Police fired more than 50 rounds at the attackers, out of fear they would detonate their suicide vests, which turned out to be fake. In total, 7 people were killed by the attackers, with 48 others injured, 21 critically. As of this writing, the names of the attackers have not been publicly released. However, authorities believe they know who they were, and according to Home Secretary Amber Rudd, they are confident about the fact that they were radical Islamic terrorists. The Amaq news agency, which serves as a mouthpiece for ISIS, claims they were ISIS fighters. The investigation into the incident is ongoing. So far, police have arrested 12 people and searched at least 4 buildings. May response. In response to the attack, Prime Minister May declared enough is enough. She has already called for review of the UK's counter-terrorism strategy. And she wants the world to work together to regulate cyberspace. According to May, the Internet provides terrorist ideology the safe space it needs to breed. She declared, "We need to work with allied democratic governments to reach international agreements that regulate cyberspace to prevent the spread of extremist and terrorism planning. And we need to do everything we can at home to reduce the risks of extremism online." Home Secretary Amber Rudd echoed this call for an international agreement that would force social media companies to make sure they do more to take down the material that is radicalizing people and to help work with us to limit the amount of end-to-end encryption that otherwise terrorists can use. This is not an all-new move for May. 3 weeks ago, May's Conservative Party released a manifesto ahead of Thursday's election. Wedged between mentions of online bullying and violent pornography was talk about pushing the internet companies to deliver on their commitments to develop technical tools to identify and remove terrorist propaganda. Another section says, "We will introduce a sanctions regime to ensure compliance, giving regulators the ability to fine or prosecute those companies that fail in their legal duties, and to order the removal of content where it clearly breaches UK law. We will also create a power in law for government to introduce an industry-wide levy from social media companies and communication service providers to support awareness and preventative activity to counter internet harms." While it may seem within the scope of government, it may be impossible to police the internet in the way May is talking about. Consider that Facebook has 1.2 billion people who log into it every day. And over at YouTube, users upload 65 years worth of video every day. And that's to say nothing of daily email newsletters. The scale may be too large to deal with without eviscerating social media. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, trouble continues in the Philippine city of Marawi. Most of the city's residents have fled the fighting there. However, it is believed that some 2,000 remain. Over the weekend, a truce was worked out to allow about half of those civilians to leave. But only an hour into the 4-hour truce, it broke down, and only 130 civilians were able to leave. Interestingly, the truce between the government and the local ISIS branch was actually mediated by the Maro Islamic Liberation Front. Pay no attention to their initials, a local separatist movement that has already signed their own peace accord with the government there. It's unclear which side broke the most recent truce, and there are hopes for another temporary ceasefire today. One thing the local ISIS branch is not responsible for was Friday's attack on the Resorts World Manila, where more than 30 people were killed. The gunman there tried to steal casino chips and went out of his way not to shoot people. Despite ISIS claiming credit for the incident, officials think it was a botched robbery attempt, with one general saying it does not have the slightest signature of terrorism whatsoever. You may burn to death or suffocate, but at least you don't have to stress about volcanoes. Sure, Mars gets all the press and probes and movies and novels, but terms of size and structure and chemistry and distance from the Sun, the most Earth-like planet in the solar system is our neighbor Venus. So if it's so damn much like Earth, why doesn't it have more volcanoes? Come on, Mars has volcanoes, big ones. But what gives with Venus? They have some volcanoes, just not as many. Well, a new study from the University of St. Andrews may have an answer. If there's one thing we all know about Venus, it's that it's hot. The surface temperature is regularly over 800 degrees. That's enough to melt lead. Since it's so hot, Venus's crust stays soft, almost in a semi-viscous state. So on Earth, cracks form in the crust, lava moves up, and we get volcanoes. On Venus, since everything is so soft, those cracks never form, and the magma gets stuck in the crust. This also explains why Venus doesn't have tectonic activity the way we do on Earth. Okay, so why does this matter? Well, it has implications far beyond our solar system. If we understand how and why this works, when we find extrasolar planets, we might be able to discern between those that can support life like good old Earth, and poisonous hellscapes like Venus. From hell's heart, I stab at thee, for hate's sake, I spit my last taquito at thee. And so it was that one man, Boston shop owner Abu Massa, faced down the mighty empire of 7-Eleven. It began when the corporate offices demanded his franchise begin selling hot food. And we're using the term food loosely here. If you've ever gotten a hot dog at 7-Eleven, and survived the subsequent amoebic dysentery, you know what we mean. According to Massa, he couldn't move hot foods, they just wouldn't sell, so he had to throw away hundreds of dollars of product. He complained, but the powers that be told Massa that he had signed a contract, and needed to follow their edicts. Litigation followed and Massa settled out of court. But that wasn't enough for Massa. Across the street from his old store, which is under new management, he opened a new convenience store called 612. His goal is to drive 7-Eleven out of business. The scorned store owner plans to sell everything his old store did, except hot food. He has a secret weapon: I know the price of everything in that store, so I sell the same things cheaper. And so far it's working. His old customers in the neighborhood are supporting him. He is the one man standing athwart breakfast empanada bites yelling stop. Sane box. Meanwhile, at Ricochet, Father's Day is just around the corner, and since we're all getting bombarded with flyers for tool sales, Ricochet community moderator Skip Sill opened a discussion of which tools are the most useful. Read what he and our members have to say. Speaking to a gathering of reporters last week, LeBron James discussed his thoughts about racism in American culture. Ricochet member Derek Green talks about what James said and his gigantic missed opportunity. Off and on since 1988, Ricochet contributor John Walker has been messing with cellular automata. No, they're not tiny robots, although we're sure he's been messing with those too, but he explains what they are, and how you can use Cell Lab to explore them. New Ricochet podcasts. New podcasts, no time to attempt clever write-ups, jumping right in. This week on the Ricochet podcast, the boys welcome Pat Buchanan to talk about his new book, Nixon's White House Wars, The Battles That Made and Broke a President and Divided America Forever, Then they talk about Dennis Prager's wave making peace at NR. On Mad Dogs and Englishmen, Kevin and Charlie talk about. Well, it's like 90% Charlie, and he spends the whole time talking about the new remix of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Seriously though, listen to it. It's like a masterclass on Sgt. Pepper. On the Daily Standard, Fred Barnes talks about the Virginia governor's race and Lee Smith covers the international politics of Wonder Woman. On the Liberty Files, David French talks with Robert Shibley of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education about the most recent academic year and whether the defenders of liberty are winning the war. On Need to Know, Mona Charan and Jane Ortoliner talk about Trump relatives, Russia, violence, campuses, pronouns, the Oslo Freedom Forum, and of course, Kathy Griffin. On Smart Girl Politics, April, Kira, and Terry talk about the Indy 500 infield, the scourge of fidget spinners, concerned trolling, Baltimore schools, and of course, Kathy Griffin. And whether it's grinding out another workday or just grinding low-grade horse meat into convenience store hot dogs, you better do it right with a 3-martini lunch. Jim Garrity of National Review and Greg Corombos of Radio America talk the panic over the Paris pullout, the close runoff election between Jon Ossoff and Karen Handel, and of course, Kathy Griffin. For the love of God, can we all please stop talking about Kathy Griffin now? Today, in history. On this day in 1832, the June Rebellion broke out in Paris. This failed attempt to overthrow French King Louis Philippe is probably best known from Les Miserables. It's always overshadowed by the events of 1830 and 1848, but if you're interested in the real story, we suggest you check out episode 6.08 of Mike Duncan's Revolutions podcast. On this day in 1883, the first regularly scheduled journey of the Orient Express took place. The long-distance passenger train service is best known for its guarantee of at least one murder on every trip. On this day in 1956, in an appearance on The Milton Berle Show, Elvis Presley scandalized the world with suggestive hip movements during a performance of his new single Hound Dog. You can see it here, so in a way, now you know who to blame for Robin Thicke. We heartily recommend. There seem to be certain rules to superhero movies. The DC ones are terrible. The costume needs to be darker and edgier. And for the love of God, the main hero can never, ever be a woman. Over the weekend, the #1 movie is one that broke all 3 rules. We are talking, of course, about Wonder Woman. Actress Gal Gadot reprises her role from last year's Batman v Superman as the titular character, however, we don't think they ever say Wonder Woman in the flick. This is a period piece that flashes back a century to reveal Wonder Woman's origins and how she helped end the First World War. So can you take your daughter to this film? The answer to that is yes. The film is rated PG-13 and it includes war violence. However, there's no gore, nobody gets their hands sawed off, and we're pretty sure they don't even show blood. Also, there's no sex, although there is a tiny amount of innuendo, and no profanity that we can remember. So you're probably in safe hands. Opening shot. Fortune is like glass, the brighter the glitter, the more easily broken. Publilius Syrus. The trouble of Trump travel tweets. Next week, arguments will be filed with the Supreme Court appealing the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling stopping President Trump's travel ban. The controversial majority opinion quoted the public comments of the president and his advisors, including tweets and interviews, talking about a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. And if you'll recall, this is the second, revised travel ban, enacted by the president after the first order, infamous for how poorly it was written and implemented, was halted by the courts. Well, the president did himself no favors Monday when he took to Twitter to say, the Justice Department should have stayed with the original travel ban, not the watered-down, politically correct version they submitted to SC, even using the phrase travel ban causes complications, prompting Trump to also tweet, "People, the lawyers and the courts can call it whatever they want, but I am calling it what we need and what it is, a travel ban." It's important to recall that both travel bans were supposed to be emergency temporary measures. The administration wanted 90 days to conduct a review and decide on new vetting procedures for foreign travelers. Well, it's been 90 days since the original order. They've figured it out by now, right? Not so much. According to Jeff Wall, the acting Solicitor General, when the Fourth Circuit struck down a second travel ban, administration officials put our pens down and have done nothing to review the vetting procedures for these countries. Big drama in Little Qatar. Yesterday, 7 Islamic countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, Bahrain, Yemen, Libya, and the Maldives, abruptly broke off diplomatic relations with Qatar. Saudi Arabia closed its border with the nation. The UAE and Egypt have booted Qatari diplomats. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain have booted Qatari visitors and residents and banned their own citizens from traveling there. However, Qataris can still travel to Saudi Arabia for the Hajj. Egyptair, Etihad Airways, Emirates, and other airlines from those countries have cancelled flights to and from Doha, and their airspace has been closed to Qatar Airways. So what's going on here? These countries have accused Qatar of engaging in practices that strengthen terrorism. Specifically that they've supported extremist groups, that wealthy Qataris are giving donations to Islamist groups in Syria, including the Nusra Front, and Iranian-backed terrorist groups. Of course, it's pretty rich for the Saudi government, of all people, to accuse someone else of this stuff. Rex Tillerson has publicly urged these countries to settle their differences with dialogue. As well he should. You see, Qatar is home to Al Udeid Air Base. This massive airbase with a 12-foot runway, serves, among other things, as the forward HQ of U.S. Central Command. It is also the logistics and basing hub for U.S. operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this inter-Arab spat puts the U.S. in a sticky spot. Shooting in Orlando. Yesterday morning in Orlando, 5 people were killed when a man, identified by police as one John Robert Newman, entered Fiamma, a company that makes awnings for RVs, and shot them to death with a handgun before shooting himself. Obviously, considering the recent events in the UK, and next week's anniversary of the attack at the Pulse nightclub, thoughts first turn to terrorism. Not so in this case. Newman was an employee who had been fired back in April. So it wasn't terrorism. Just an ordinary horrible mass shooting. Feeling hot, hot, hot. Do you enjoy the heat? Are you looking for some place warm to catch some rays? May we suggest planet Kelt 9b? According to new research published this week in Nature, Kelt 9b is the hottest planet around. We mean that literally. The exoplanet is a gas giant locked in an orbit so one side is always facing its sun. Scientists pegged the daytime temperature at 7,700 degrees Fahrenheit. It's so hot that atoms can't even bind together to form molecules. It has some other interesting features too. Its orbit takes it around the poles of its sun, rather than the equator, and it's so close that it whips around an orbit every 36 hours. In fact, it's so close, that the star blows out Kelt 9b's atmosphere like the tail of a comet. If that sounds weird, it's because it is. Kelt 9b is so weird that it took the scientists involved years to figure out that what they were seeing is real. But the planet is notable for more than just being weird. Scientists think that Kelt 9b is the tip of the iceberg and there may be many more super hot gas giants like this out there. When jumping into a moving vehicle is the smart thing. Randy Tompkins was driving last Friday when he noticed a car in the wrong lane driving straight for him. The driver of the oncoming car was seizing. As if it were the scene from some low-energy action movie, Tompkins leapt through the passenger window of the other vehicle, which was going about 10 miles per hour. He put his fingers into the mouth of the driver to keep him from biting his tongue. A cop car was nearby, so there's actually dashboard video of the guy jumping through the window. The driver was taken to a hospital as a precaution and police are rightly praising Tompkins for his heroic act to help a complete stranger. That being said, shoving your finger in the mouth of someone having a seizure is a bad idea. Ditto for any kind of object. In the case of your fingers, you're asking to get them bitten off. A foreign object could cause someone to choke or break their teeth. So no spoons, wallets, leather, belts, or sticks. And contrary to urban legends, no, you can't swallow your tongue. Okay, so in an ordinary situation, one not involving a moving car, what should you do if someone's having a seizure? It's important to protect the person from injury. So you should guide them to the floor if possible, and make sure they can't hit their head or injure themselves on furniture or other objects. If they're already on the ground, try to position them on their side so any fluids can come out of their mouth. Just don't apply too much pressure when you're doing this, because you don't want to dislocate anything. For a seizure, you don't always need to call an ambulance. It's important to keep track of how long it lasts. Most seizures don't last longer than 90 seconds. If it lasts more than 5 minutes, call an ambulance. And you'll want to make a note of the length so you can tell paramedics how long it's been. You should also call if the person is pregnant, if the seizure happens after a head injury, or if they stop breathing for more than 30 seconds. In which case you should also start rescue breathing. Also, if someone has a fever, severe headache, or trouble walking, speaking, or thinking clearly after a seizure, you should also seek help. But we're not doctors, obviously, so please don't take our word for it. Ask a professional. And if you want more info on how to help, WebMD has lots of details. SaneBox. Meanwhile, at Ricochet. When it comes to dealing with terrorist attacks, officials recently told Londoners that they should run, hide, tell. Ricochet editor-in-chief John Gabriel discusses this strategy and how it compares to the resolve of past British generations. But should they be criticized for that? Ricochet editor Clara Berlinski offers her response to John's criticism of run, hide, tell, and discusses other reactions, helpful and unhelpful. To throw another response into the mix, Ricochet contributor Titus Tekra responds to Claire's post and views prudence through the lens of powerlessness. And speaking of responses, Ricochet member and Hanson Daily Shot author Fred Cole responds to comments made by Dennis Prager in his recent appearance on the Ricochet podcast. Be forewarned, however, that it lapses into, as one commenter put it, typical Fred Cole belligerence. New Ricochet podcasts. A new week means a new commentary podcast. Noah Rothman, Abe Greenwald, and John Podhoretz talk about the London attacks and how all the attention has shifted to the president's spat with the mayor of London. And the boys salute Israel on the golden anniversary of the Six-Day War. London is one of the top tourist destinations on the planet. How will the recent terror attacks affect travel? On the Daily Standard, Eric Felton talks with Rudy Maxa about the effects of terrorism on tourism. On a brand new Events podcast, a President Arthur Brooks talks to Senator Ben Sasse about his new book, The Vanishing American Adult, Our Coming-of-Age Crisis, and how to rebuild a culture of self-reliance. Forget movies, let's talk about movie theaters. On the latest episode of The Substandard, the boys air their grievances about everything from screen masking to sticky floors. And whether it's walking over sticky floors or trying to avoid walking over punji sticks, hey, we do a lot of these, they can't all be winners, you're gonna be better off with a 3-martini lunch. Jim Garrity of National Review and Greg Corombos of Radio America cheer Theresa May's tough statement after the London Bridge attack and share their frustration over President Trump's latest Twitter tirade over his travel ban. Today, in history. On this day in 1813, during the War of 1812, British forces beat the Americans at the Battle of Stony Creek. Just to clarify, that's Stony Creek with an E, in Ontario. Not the Stony Creek, without an E, in Queensland, or the one in Victoria, Connecticut, Indiana, Virginia, or New York. On this day in 1844, the Young Men's Christian Association was founded in London. We heard it's fun to stay there, but the dress code is rather eccentric. On this day in 1933, the first drive-in theater was opened in Camden, New Jersey, by Richard Hollingshead, a local chemical company magnate. So now you know who to blame for the conception of your great-uncle Wilbur. We heartily recommend. Last week, we, and everyone else on Earth, mentioned the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper. What we did not mention, when we recommended it, was the new remix of the album, produced by Giles Martin, son of Beatles producer George Martin. Then we listened to the most recent episode of Mad Dogs and Englishmen, where Charlie Cook explains the whole thing inside and out, and we ended up purchasing it. Basically, Martin pulled all the tracks apart and put them back together using a mix of vintage and modern technology. It now sounds like something fit for 21st century ears, not something recorded in the same century as Wax Cylinders. This isn't the kind of thing you want to listen to on your phone speaker sitting in the parking lot of a strip mall after immediately downloading it. You want to sit in a chair with your eyes closed and listen through a pair of noise-canceling headphones. Which is precisely what we did. But since we're unsure of our own opinions, we asked the Blue Yeti, a Beatles aficionado who knows infinitely more about music than we do. And he was the only member of the Ricochet staff who got our obscure Pepper reference back on March 29. He said, "I agree with everything Charlie Cook said on the latest Mad Dogs podcast." So there you have it. Go listen to what Charlie said, then buy the album. You'll be glad you did. Upcoming Ricochet member meetup events: Las Vegas, July 21st. Reagan Library, Simi Valley, California, July 23rd. These events are for Ricochet members only, but if you're not a member, you should join now. Once again, the content was stolen from The Daily Shot without their permission. This podcast is not, at least not yet, a production of Ricochet.com. Let's see if 2 Liters 2R can win its way into whatever Rob Long has cooked up to rival NPR. Written by Fred Cole. Edited by John Gabriel. Become a Ricochet member. Copyright 2017 Ricochet, all rights reserved. The Daily Shot is written and distributed by Ricochet.com.